Thank you. We have around 350 people here in this conference from European and other countries. We have statisticians, data analysts, we have researchers, we have journalists. So you all know how quality statistics data is important in the world where people are frustrated about the fake news. So movies like Don't Look Up, books like Factfulness invite us to be more mindful in the ways we are using information. But are we? Are we? What if people and their leaders could rely on quality statistics data more often? How can we provide this quality statistics data to people so they could understand it better? And what is the role of national statistical authorities in this process of providing this data for people so they could make better decisions? We hope you will have time and space here to explore these issues. And let me invite some of you on the stage, some of you who have important roles to promote our agenda. And as I mention your name, please come to the stage. So, Director General of Eurostat, Dr. Mariana Kotseva. Yeah. Yes. Director General of Statistics Lithuania, Dr. Jūratė Petrauskienė. President of the Polish Statistical Office, Dr. Dominik Roskrut. Thank you, thank you. Yes, please take a stage. And now I'd like to invite the Prime Minister of Republic of Lithuania, Ingrida Šimonytė, to say opening speech. Please.
Let me use this stage to share a couple of my own takes on how the role of statistician is changing. More than 10 years ago, I was a Minister of Finance, trying to shape the fiscal policy during the times of imminent global meltdown and its aftermath. Lithuania was hit very hard by that crisis, and our institutions had to shift gears. We needed to act with incredible speed. Therefore, we were shifting from annual reports to quarterly data. The data in question was essentially limited to macroeconomic data. Now, fast forward to the current times. In a time span of only 2 years, Lithuania went through a severe COVID pandemic, couple of waves. The influx of illegal migration organized by Belarusian dictator, and this late winter, Russia started invasion into Ukraine. Each of these situations required swift decision-making, situational awareness, and perception of the progress we're making. Importantly, during the last 2 years, the data landscape has expanded significantly and now encompasses very detailed data on infections in various stages, hospitals, border monitoring, lodging, etc. Anything what was needed to manage a specific situation. Now, the information we, as government, act upon is gathered a day before. Quite a change from quarterly reports. And I can say for sure that without quality and near real-time data, the government of Lithuania would have been working in the dark. We would not be able to make bold and timely decisions without awareness of the situation. We would not be able to make efficient decisions without proper analysis. This mode of operation was enabled by Transform Statistics Lithuania. They reinvented their mission to go beyond pure statistics. Statistics Lithuania became our single source of all information, reliable and both updated, integrating various institutions' data sources from whatever legacy applications or paperwork they have been employing prior. They became our tool for consolidating data and making it available to decision makers at all levels of governmental structures. I consider this as an incredible transition. In my opinion, the subject of statistics always lacked the present time, while the government's biggest problems actually lie in the present. Statistics consolidated data of the past and tried to make it instrumental for the future, somehow detaching itself from the present. After the above-mentioned transition, Statistics Lithuania became an essential tool for dealing with the problems that are at present. The new law on official statistics is being now discussed in our parliament. The law will complete this above-mentioned transition by making consolidated data of all governmental institutions widely available for the use of the public sector, thus making a significant step towards evidence-based decision-making and decisions of better quality. Welcoming this international community of statisticians convened at this conference, I wish you a very inspiring discussion: how to turn evidence-based policy making into reality. Thank you very much. Have a nice conference.
Thank you. Thank you, Prime Minister Ingrida Šimonytė. And now, Director General of Eurostat, Dr. Mariana Kotseva, please make your opening statement.
Thank you very much, dear Prime Minister, dear Director General and friend of Statistics Lithuania, dear colleagues, guests, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's a little bit a challenge for us to do a nice key welcome address after this wonderful performance of young Lithuanians, but still, let us try to say a couple of words as well. On behalf of Eurostat, the main co-organizer of this event, together with Statistics Lithuania, I'm very delighted to welcome you today and to see so many people participating physically after quite a long period where we missed this kind of interactions due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm also very pleased to welcome Ukrainian colleagues who have made it. They came, and please join me. And this is really admirable how you managed to continue striving for professionalism under these dark times and difficult times for your country. So the Quality Conference, the first one, took place almost 20 years ago. In fact, this is its 10th edition. During this period, the Quality Conference has become a place to exchange best practices, to present achievements, to inspire each other, to build up partnerships and networks. In fact, in the European context, there are two conferences which shape the research and innovation agenda of official statistics, and they alternate every 2 years. One is related to new technologies and techniques, and the second one is the Quality Conference. So, in fact, these two topics are the two pillars of official statistics, namely the constant strive which we have, which we maintain, despite of the difficulties, despite of the resource constraints, despite of overloading, despite of the difficulties which we face every day in the fast-changing environment in which we are operating in. These two pillars are the constant strive for innovation and adopting the state-of-the-art, the best technologies in order to perform our mission in best way. And the second one is quality. So if you look at the history of Q conferences, I did it yesterday a bit researching in the plane. And I have noticed that if you look at the topics and their evolution at Q conference, you could see the history of official statistics. 20 years ago, this conference was purely focused on the narrow definition of quality, which is usually a perception that quality is just accuracy. But over the years, the topics which have been exchanged has expanded, because quality in official statistics is a multi-dimensional topic. It covers not just accuracy, it covers relevance, it covers timeliness, it covers comparability, it covers coherence, the easy access to data. And therefore, the quality conference is so important because it has an impact on the development of official statistics. So today, if you look at the program, you will see that beyond these classical dimensions of quality, we are going to discuss institutional framework, legal framework. You mentioned, Prime Minister. It's extremely important to have rules in today's fast-changing environment, in the emerging data ecosystems, to find the right place of official statistics, obligations, rights, but also to have a predictability for our data holders, for those whom we are disturbing, according to some perceptions, to get data. So this is extremely important to discuss institutional framework. And also we are going to discuss topics like communication of quality, because speaking about statistics is also equally important, because in today's world of fake news is not enough. We cannot take it for granted that everybody goes to the site of Statistics Lithuania, or if this is the case, you have to share with me the secret, how you have achieved that. We have every day to explain why European official statistics has to be a trustworthy reference point for quality statistics on data on European and national economies and society. And conference is very timely, because after these 2 years, I'm sure we have developed quite new ideas prompted by the developments, because we had to respond it quickly, faster, using new data sources which we didn't know, because we had to deliver in these last 2 years. So therefore, it's a very beautiful moment now that we come together physically to share these latest achievements, and because I'm sure that they will have a profound impact on the future of official statistics. Therefore, I also would like to wish you fruitful discussions, pleasant to meet colleagues, because in statistics we are family, we like to discuss, and we often say if you want to see European Union in positive functioning, you have to arrive in official statistics, because we have a common goal, the goal to bring information, high-quality data for better decisions and for better lives. And thank you very much to Statistics Lithuania, who has hosted the Lithuanian government, of course. We are not by chance in this country, because Statistics Lithuania has a very strong tradition in quality, and as you described, you continue to be one of pioneers how to position statistics in new data ecosystem. So we are happy to learn this experience, to challenge, because it's a shift in paradigm, by the way, and there are a lot of supporters, but also more skeptical people whether this is the right way to go, whether we are going beyond the frontiers of official statistics. So let's use this time together for the future development of official statistics. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mariana Kotseva, for bringing hope. And now, Director General of Statistics Lithuania, Dr. Jūratė Petrauskienė.
Dear Director General of Eurostat, Prime Minister, Chancellor of the government, honorable participant from the European Union and other countries, colleagues, statisticians. I'm very honored to host the 10th European Conference on Quality in Official Statistics. The forum, which is indispensable in development of European statistical system. Our common goal is generating and sharing official statistics in the European Union level. Official statistics must be of high quality and comparable among member countries. This is a difficult task. So every 2 years we come together to share knowledge, ideas, research, solutions, and good practices. Recent years have been especially rich in complex challenges: Brexit, COVID pandemics, Russia's war in Ukraine. So I'm certain that we all will have a lot to deliberate upon. And I hope that all of us will have a pleasant time, fruitful discussions, interesting talks during the 3 days here in our wonderful Vilnius. And I also hope that you will bring the ideas and insights back to your colleagues upon your return. The future belongs to those who share and work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jūratė Petrauskienė. So now is the time for the key speech by Dr. Dominique Roskrut as you walk to the stage. And also let us thank Prime Minister Ingrida Šimonytė for finding time to come to our conference. Thank you, Prime Minister. Let me briefly introduce Dr. Dominique Roskrut. He has been the president of Statistics Poland since 2016. He is a member of European Statistical System Committee. Currently, he is also chairing the task force of the Partnership Group on Access to Privately Held Data. He is a member of OECD's Committee on Statistics and Statistics Policy and serves as this committee's Bureau Vice Chair since 2020. Moreover, he is a member of the UNICEF UNECE Conference of European Statistics and holds a Conference Bureau Vice Chair function. At the UN level, he represents Poland in the UN Statistical Commission. So, the topics of the key speech is information quality framework and data stewardship in official statistics.
Thank you very much, dear Prime Minister. Prime Minister already left, but dear Mariana, dear Jūratė, dear colleagues, it's a huge honor for me to be here today. And I must admit, I've never been to Lithuania, which is embarrassing. And it's probably because I live on the border with Germany, so that wasn't easy so far. So I'm even more happy today that I have this privilege, and I'm not going to hide that I'm a little bit nervous because really standing in front of such a wonderful community full of real experts is of course challenging. But I'll try to do my best. Here's my presentation. I would like to do a quick overview, starting with the things that are probably obvious in terms of like what we're discussing at the moment. You've heard all of those, my engagements. I think, I know whether they are important, but at least they show that I'm enthusiastic. And I've read something smart recently, that if you're enthusiastic, it adds 25 points to your IQ test. So I count on that. Anyway, I want to discuss a little bit the issues of challenges stemming from what's happening around our offices and our environments, and then how it affects, in my humble opinion, some of the aspects of the quality that we should take into account, probably more profoundly than we used to do so far, not because we have been omitting some important duties, but because these things haven't been so developed like they are now today. So, starting quickly, of course, I always, this is, I'm going to talk about the reuse of data. This is a reuse of slide. I'm always starting with this slide because I'm very often frustrated with my students, for example, or even my staff, not remembering what we are there for. And this first principle is extremely important. It's very important to understand that we are there for the purpose to serve our society. We're servants. And of course, the nice occasion this year is that we have a 30th anniversary of the fundamental principles. So that's why I'm repeating that slide with a little bit of satisfaction as well. that we have those principles that can guide our behavior on the information market or in this information environment. So there's a little thesis here. There's a need for an integrated, comprehensive framework for quality management in official statistics. And again, someone might claim that we have one, or we have even more than one. But what I want to say is probably that we have to always kind of like revisit them and evaluate them and see if there's anything missing, and maybe try to make them a little bit more integrated as they're kind of like becoming more and more fragmented when we try to deal with those other topics that haven't been available so far. So objectives of the short presentations are twofold: reviewing the current state and identifying areas in need of development work. And of course, I will not be able to do the full revision, because it's like when you hit 50 slides, and you realize that's too much already, but at least some of them. And then taking into account the observed trends in the information environment of official statistics and its potential role. So I want to reflect on where we are. So start with a reflection. Information environment, this is the term that I'm using here. I do that on purpose. We talk about ecosystem, but ecosystem is a little bit more profound. It's not only the subjects, but also the relationships between the subjects. I want to clearly kind of like simplify the analysis and say something about information environment. Of course, I quote Professor Oleński, who, by the way, was a head of our office twice. So we say first Oleński and second Oleński. And then he also was engaged into the birth of fundamental principles. He wrote a paper recently about the information environment in a nowadays society and economy, and he claims that it affects official statistics. And of course, sure, when we take into account the first principle, it should affect it. But he comes back with the positive message that we should also affect this information environment, hopefully positively, because there is a role to play for us, and we should be careful in kind of like realizing that. So what's the information environment? All resources, processes, information systems, legal norms, information entities constitute this environment. Of course, people and establishments that participate in this are part of that. And it determines the scope of the information, or semiotic forms and semantic forms as well, organizational, legal, technical, and economic conditions of access to information by specific groups of people or entities. That's kind of like a pure definition. But I want to come back with another slide that I'm reusing often. We observed those exploding data ecosystems recently, which pose a challenge towards statistics. We observe this skyrocketing number of actors, these overwhelming complications, these lacking skills that we have in our offices, and of course, bigger and bigger demand for insight. That these are the challenges that shape our frustration on a daily basis, I would say, and we have to react somehow to them. So how we react, we need to realize this is something that I claim very often. Maybe it's not profound enough yet, but I'm kind of like adding line after line to this slide, that the paradigm of official statistics is changing a little bit. Because we used to be in a situation where there was a scarcity of data, and we need to take the sample, we need to survey. Now we have the situation when there's an abundance of data points, and we have an overrepresentation in terms of the transaction data from big data sources, for example. So we need to, instead of grossing up, we need to scale it down somehow. So that's a changing paradigm. And of course, add integration, whatever else we are doing in the background, and it seems like a huge challenge already to come up with new methods to deal with that. And then, of course, raw data versus processed data. Raw data is transactions, and process is survey. But raw is not what it used to be. We used to call raw data the data that we had from the surveys, from the enterprises. But when we rethink that, the simple thing, it wasn't raw data in the current understanding. It was processed data. The enterprise processed the data and sent us replies to our surveys. So we are at a different point. We are sometimes before the entity itself rather than after the entity in terms of monitoring the data generation process. And the nature of the data generation process has changed. And of course, secondary data versus primary data. I know our colleagues from these data kind of like market, they don't like to use those terms. They prefer to use the reuse of data or whatever, but I'm sticking to the old-fashioned, statistical terms here. So we come up with the new role for the official statistics that, stems somehow from those new environmental developments. And this role is, of course, also discussed profoundly by us. It's called data stewardship. And it's not our invention. It has been there on the kind of like a business side of the story, but we are trying to adopt it and to rethink it, what it can mean to us as well. And so our role goes beyond the conducting production of statistics and now extends to constituting information standards to help shaping a secure information environment for the society and economy. I'm going to come back to this issue. But what do we think by data stewardship? There are some, discussions. I know there's this colleague of ours, Stefan Verhulst from New York. He's amazing, and he writes amazing things. So, but of course, his area of interest is much wider than official statistics. It's just data stewardship for the sake of increasing collaboration between different stakeholders, including public sector as well. But he comes up with a lot of materials that describe what the data stewards are, and of course, the objective. Let's start with the objective. It's to enable systematic, sustainable, responsible reuse of data, and how? By constituting data stewards who are empowered to help in this endeavor. And how do they do that? They have some responsibilities to collaborate, protect, and act. And how they take those responsibilities on their backs? They play some roles of partnerships and community engagement, internal condition and staff engagement, and so on and so forth. So they're kind of like facilitators or catalyzers, I would say, in using chemical language. And that's an important notion that, data stewards, because sometimes when we discuss this term, I sense this kind of like hope that we can be a centralized data steward for the whole economy, whatever. I don't think that's right way, or that's a right perspective. We need to promote playing the roles of the data stewards among different stakeholders, among different entities. And of course, to the extent that we are capable of doing that same role, playing the same role, we can also do it at our level, but we will not succeed if we will not engage in this wave of promotion of this role also outside of our premises. Anyway, so if I try to distill it to a few of the roles that I think are important for the NSIs as possible data stewards, I came up with those. Spreading the information culture of the society adequate to the current progress of information technologies, processes, and systems. Then promotion of a good, consistent, obligatory information standards covering minimum quality requirements. That you can see easily that the role of data stewards is directly linked with the overall quality of the information environment. Okay, the third one is promotion of information systems and resources that provide only high quality information. Of course, in contrary to that, limiting within the public sphere the use of information systems and services that do not guarantee appropriate quality. And of course, the biggest challenge, combating untruths, false information, rumors, incorrect reporting, algorithmic bias, this is a new thing, prevention of information provocations used to influence social behavior. So these are kind of like very general principles that I think we should take into account when thinking about the role of the data steward. But we are taking this role in order to be, because we are feeling very responsible for the overall quality of the information environment. That's where it stems from, for me at least. We are there, we are well trained, we are specialists, we're professionals. We need to take this responsibility on us, because if not us, then whom? So, but that's a big challenge, because it goes a little bit beyond the kind of like simple understanding of what equality is. I can start with the dictionary definition. I like to do that very often. I have a very harsh discussion with my native speakers colleagues from our community a few months ago about what the privacy means. But of course, I think I, to some degree, had a good argument because I used the Oxford Dictionary. Anyway, so I like to start with this one, how good or bad something is. And, but of course, quality can also be attributed to the positive side of that. So if something is of quality, then it's good. So we can think of statistics of quality. We should actually have these badges. Our office is a producer of statistics of quality, whatever. But we have those ISO definitions that have been extensively used in our documentation, also prepared by the Eurostat. I'm not going to cover that. But back to the core, starting with the simplest possible way of understanding the quality. When we think about the beginning of the official statistics and sampling and representative method, and Neyman, the Polish statistician who came up with the necessary theory behind. In pure statistical sense, error is the difference between the estimate and the true unknown value of the parameter. And that's you might say, the ultimate indicator of the quality, if you're on the truth side of the story. Because pursuit of the truth is something that really is our aim, I guess. We need to pursue the truth, no matter what the truth is. And sometimes we don't even know that. And we need to find ways and methods to identify it correctly and measure it somehow accurately. So anyway, we can extend it a little bit, when we think about the estimator and its properties, it's usually what we discuss is in biasness, efficiency, and consistency. But of course, statisticians went a little bit outside of that as well, identifying other errors, which are non-sampling errors, like coverage error or measurement error. For example, from the poor questionnaire design, this is what I'm going to address in a few slides from here. Or non-response error can be unit or item non-response or processing error as well. There are many of those errors that we can make, and we need to take care of those processes in order to make them correctly. Of course, we're trying to come up with some appropriate, frameworks to deal with those risks. Official statisticians, I would say, are just statisticians who know how to gracefully recover from their mistakes because they're professionals. So one of the ways is coming up with those frameworks, quality assurance frameworks at the European statistical system. Of course, it stems from European Statistics Code of Practice itself, so those documents are interlinked. And of course, we are just to simplify the whole content. We just define quality in terms of relevancy, accuracy, timeliness, and punctuality, accessibility and clarity, comparability and coherence. These are our definitions, which, by the way, bring me to a side question. Does timeliness matters? When you kind of try to understand what the quality means, does the fact that something is 1 year from here or 3 years from here change its quality? It's hard to kind of assume that it changes. But okay, I'm not discussing with that. It's very important to a little bit more profoundly stress the fact that we understand quality in a little bit broader context. It's not only the quality in terms of the accuracy of the estimate, it's also a concept that covers the issue of usefulness. And that's very important, because when we introduce this usefulness, I think that the overall challenge, multiplies ahead of us, because we need to take care of it since now. Anyway, so a few aspects of quality management and official statistics which I think are relevant at the moment. First of all, I would start with the most general one. Of course, I'm using the work of a few authors, Oleński here and OECD from last year. Information quality. The right to the truth, to freedom of speech, thought, and expression are indispensable for the democratic societies. We don't need to prove it. Professor Oleński actually very often, recall this fact that he takes fundamental principles from the fundamental human rights, which is the right to the information and to the truth. And that's very important linkage, I would say. So in contemporary societies or economies, the quality of the information environments in which people or entities or public institutions or international organizations function impacts Siri wants to engage into a lecture. Impacts the political, social, economic order. So Professor Oleński states something that he calls a fundamental law of information. And I like this law because it easily expresses a very important concept. That the overall tendency of the information environment, that the worse information displaces better information. We know it from the monetary, side. There's this Copernicus law that the, worse money just displaces better money. We know from the last few centuries. Probably something like that happens in terms of the information. It's easier for the bad information to exist than for the good information. That's where our role is, actually. So if we want to discuss the issue of inaccurate, untruthful information, it would be useful if we would have a typology of inaccurate information. The OECD actually came with one, not our committee on statistics. Statistics is fragmented among different units in the OECD. But this is very interesting. Access to accurate information is important as combating the untruth and false information. We know that even reliable information can be misused in order to cheat someone. So we see those kind of like not parallel, orthogonal, I forgot the word, dimensions like active fabrication, no active fabrication, or intent to harm, or versus no intent to harm. And when we try to define the issues from in this kind of like space, then we come up with four, at least I'm using some misinformation. Actually, there are 5, but I don't agree with the 5th one. Anyway, but with the 4 classes. The first one is disinformation, which refers to verifiably false or misleading information that is knowingly, intentionally created. Then we have a misinformation. The first was disinformation. The second is misinformation, that refers to false or misleading information that is shared unknowingly. With no intent. We just do it because we don't know. We are, to some degree, ignorant. Then the third one is contextual deception, refers to the use of true but not necessarily correctly related and contextualized information. This is where we try to use proper information in the wrong context. And the fourth one, propaganda, which is, of course, naturally easy to understand. The first one, the fifth one that I'm skipping is satire. Well, I think satire is very positive. I'm using it in my office all the time, so I don't agree. It's my way of, sense of humor is always a good way of dealing with your own frustrations. So satire not included here. But anyway, I think it's very useful because we need to kind of like know the map of the space which we are trying to travel through. So anyway, Oleński actually, in the same regard, comes up with some proposition of the hierarchy of the criteria for the quality of information, and he assumes as follows: the most important one is truth, compliance with the facts. Then the second one, under this is social usefulness of information, so general usefulness. And the third one is usefulness in the particular context, particular situation. So we have this hierarchy that we can also kind of like use to establish this or to classify information according to the classes that I've described previously. So this is a place where I want to revisit data stewardship, because I think it's extremely important in this context of false information that our role is very special. In times of digitalization and eruption of data environments and ecosystems, information security should be safeguarded by appropriate development of information infrastructure, comprising both resources and systems, created and maintained by the state institutions. And if we agree with this, there is a natural follow-up to that among those institutions, official statistics should actively take and play a prominent role by extending its classical spectrum of activities to include those prevailing in the role of the data steward. So I think this is kind of like a justification for us to advocate for the role of the data steward, for actually playing a little bit bigger role than we used to play, just disseminating the results of our surveys. Okay, let's go and jump into another topic that I wanted to mention. It's very close to my heart. I've been kind of like, before taking the position that I have now, I've been a director of one of the units within our systems. I was responsible for some surveys, as well as a community innovation survey and an ICT survey. And I still have some sentiments towards them, but also I sensed during that time that we might do a little bit more than we do. Considering that we establish a very complex system within the European statistical system of different member states using different languages and trying to come up with a unified measurement of things in an environment when this is not so easy as at least seems to us it is. I mean, considering our operationalization of those things. And here I'm coming back to the very old literature. You can see it's 63, 70, very good books, from that time, a lot of them. I like to discover these things because it seems like many problems have been solved already, though we have tended to forget about them. So what we do in official statistics, in a complex system like European statistical system, is comparative descriptive statements. We make them with increasing frequency, if not increasing care, unfortunately. And when we make those statements based on the observation in a specific socioeconomic systems, these observations are coded directly into the language which is used to describe them, with the direct rules of interpretations or placed indirectly into a language of the basis of inferential rules. I'm going to explain it in a moment. You see the sentence at the quotation at the bottom. For specific observation, a belch is a belch. But within an inferential framework, a belch is an insult or a compliment. So it stresses the fact that the same things, even though we think they are the same, if not properly, profoundly tested, can mean different things among different systems, different societies, let's say, if this is a social survey. So let's go a little bit further. A language of direct measurement requires only a grammar and the rules of empirical interpretation invariant across cultures or societies. A language of inferential measurement requires additionally general statements defining the meaning of the specific observation in terms of systemic context. And of course, a language of scientific measurement can incorporate the context of specific systems. And if so, how the social context can be introduced into measurement statements without destroying the uniformity and generality of the language of measurement. Of course, this meta-language exists, and it's just a language of measurement. And but when we try to establish equivalence between the, let's say, simply results from the different systems, we need to come up with some methods to do that. And sometimes we do that just simply by trying to, agree on the definition, and then the translation goes on. I remember from one of the meetings, like when the UK representative told us that they are translating English questionnaire into British English again. So it's telling. Actually, it's confirming those theoretical kind of like considerations that I'm taking from those books. So if we are looking for a measure that is reliable across systems and valid within systems, we need to have some strong tool. And the strong tool need to be a very robust underlying theory. And it's very important that we profoundly think about the issues that we want to measure when we try to do that with a very complex instrumentation among many complex and different systems. So I can tell you from my memories, we observed like very strong systematic structural variance across countries in terms of the number of businesses that claim that are innovative. And it was very easy to verify that some of those changes cannot be described using any proxies. It's just the differences in terms of understanding of those basic concepts and the culture in which those concepts are existing that made those differences, and we need to be very aware of those. This is an important issue of quality. This is probably much harder, ironically, than dealing with some quality issues in terms of new sources, big data sources. But I think I wanted to stress this fact. It's very impactful, because I, of course, know it from the side of the surveys in businesses, but of course we do a lot of social surveys as well. And we need to take this risk into account. So it's a very huge risk, which can, can be distilled back into the bad design, bad questionnaire design, for example. And then we have this paper from 2018 by Professor Hent, probably many people here knows him, and he came up with those challenges that he identified in terms of the administrative sources and big data. He actually equals the two, he calls the big data just administrative sources on transactions, so a little bit larger in terms of the data sets, but of the same kind of like nature. And he identifies those challenges. I'm not going to read them out, loudly, because everybody can come back to this paper. But I think they, lay out kind of like a very interesting space to analyze the issue of quality in terms of those new data sources, either administrative or let's call it big data sources. And I mean, there's these challenges, to some degree, more or less, are still ahead of us. And there's a lot of work that has to be done in terms of, developing detectors for particular quality issues in terms of some specific data sources, because everything has to be contextualized and operationalized. And when we go into the details, devil is in the details. Those things need to be still developed, because we still kind of like tend to circle among the sources that we have already identified, and we like to brag about them, how we use them, whatever. But there are so many of those others that we want to get access to, because we're trying to push for the access to privately held data. But of course, when we eventually get it, we need to be ready in terms of using those sources, because somebody can ask us, why was this whole endeavor for? So we have to be prepared. Taking those challenges, I think, might be very useful. So I'm not going to cover them. I'm going to go straight from those general challenges to the thing that I've been involved as well. And I think Ronald Jensen, I've just met him, virtually. Then it was a framework for assessing the quality of big data. Probably Peter Struis was there as well. I don't remember all the names. I'm sorry. So I should prepare myself better. But I think it was very useful. Still very generic, but we have identified those three kind of like macro phases: input, throughput, output. I see this has showed up in a recent report that is soon to be published on accessing privately held data as well. And we had this hierarchical structure composed of three hyperdimensions, which is the source, the metadata, and the data. And within that framework, we've been kind of like trying to identify the issues which might be important. This document is, of course, available online at the UNECE website, but I think it's still very relevant. Even though we have come up with new ideas, this general framework that has been established in that is very useful. The thing on our side now is just to use it, when we are dealing with these new data sources. So again, I think that the further work has developed as well in a related subject, which I'm going to present to you now on the next slide. I think this is this was too much, but I don't want to go into details, because it's really, my message is that some of the work has been done, and now we need to think how to integrate those different pieces of frameworks in order to come up with something very much comprehensive, integrated, and compatible as well. But the last thing that I wanted to mention was the quality indicators for the GSBPM. Very useful work as well, 2017 at the UNECE. Many of you have been participating in that, so thank you all for all those great documents. One of the hidden conclusions from what I'm saying is, it's so good that we have this community and we have those chances to meet. And thanks for the organizers this year that they offered us this platform, especially after this terrible period of pandemic. Anyway, so, but of course this is not the end of the story. We have bigger devils around the corner. We need to go a little bit beyond coefficient of variance, and how to do that in terms of AI and ML, artificial intelligence or machine learning. Let's start with clustering. What's the quality of clustering? No one knows, so no one will ask. That we have this joke in one of the Polish comedies. No one knows, so no one will ask. Because clustering is very subjective. It depends on the objective function that you will define in order to kind of like classify things according to some kind of measure. But then, of course, at the end of the day, when we are about to apply those methods, at the same time, across different member states, we need to come up with some kind of a way of making them at least compatible. I would say interpretable the same way. So that's very important. So a little theoretical understanding of clustering is offered by the literature. What is good clustering? A wide variety of different clustering methods, of course, with different measures of quality. And a clustering may have different value for different users and different users as well. So it's challenging. Of course, simple solutions, as I have alluded already, deal with the objective utility functions like sum of in-cluster distances or whatever other distances that you can define, or a restricted set of distributions like mixtures of Gaussians, these expected maximization algorithm. But there's an interesting work by Ackerman and Ben David from 2008 that postulates axioms that ideally every clustering approach should satisfy. And I think it might be kind of like a starting point for us to think about how to make those machine learning methods more useful for us in terms of harmonization of our statistical production among the different institutes. So they define clustering quality measure. They propose that you may define whatever you want, but then the axioms are scale invariance, richness, consistency, and isomorphism invariance. And the theorem that they argue for is that those axioms, they call it aspects, but they change the word to axioms later on, form a consistent set of requirements. Maybe it sounds like a little bit of mathematical language. I didn't come up with the formulas because, of course, there are many of those. But basically, these words just describe the overall concept. And I think that's very useful starting point, at least for me. I would start with that if I would have more time. I like that very much. But of course, we can go from simple clustering to machine learning. And you have this quote from a very interesting work by Honegger. It's actually a master thesis, but I find it very, very good, extremely good. Under ever-increasing complexity of machine learning models, interpretability is suffering. So the research community has recognized interpretability problem and focused on developing a growing number of so-called explanation methods. But then, however, it is unclear which explanation method offers higher explanation quality. Again, so the quality shows up here again, even though the whole issue is much more complicated. So they propose an axiomatic, again, framework. They call it explanation, the author calls it explanation consistency framework, which allows for comparing the quality of different explanation methods amongst each other. And it consists of 3 proxies, axioms for explanation quality. Whenever mathematicians start to do something, instead of calling it proxies, they will call it axioms. So 1, identity, 2, separability, and 3, stability. And these are very simple. It sounds like those rules like from the movies on robots. There are 3, I, Robot, there was a movie, there were three rules of robots, and I. It sounds like very similarly. So first one is identical objects must have identical explanation. That's very strong axiom. Second one is non-identical objects cannot have identical explanations. I see there is a lot of alluding to simple mathematical concepts as well. And the third one is that similar objects must have similar explanations. And of course, it sounds simple when you define those, but then when you try to kind of like profoundly analyze whatever you have at hand among those, according to those axioms, things get tricky and complicated. But I think they're still constituting some kind of a space in which we can move around a little bit more consciously, and that's very good. We have to create those frameworks. So they claim that interpretability comprised the 3 goals of accuracy, understandability, and efficiency. And when you test them against those axioms, you can actually, to some degree, verify whether your methods of explanation just face those requirements or not. And I'm trying to simply state it, but it's a very long master thesis. I really encourage you to take a look at. Of course, if we want to get even more generic, there are ontologies and knowledge quality issues. I don't want to spend time on that, but there is an abundance of literature which is very interesting, not from the side of statistics, but from the side of computer science, which deals with the issue of evaluation of the quality of ontologies, which are being proposed to describe whatever phenomenon we have at hand. Of course, at statistical offices, we also need to build those theories. I already alluded to that. Build those theories with a proper language, which is defined across some ontology, and we need to create this ontology. So at the very top philosophical level, we need to start with the ontology, but of course there is an issue of evaluation of the quality of the ontology itself. And we shouldn't forget about it. So it goes a little further away from the coefficient of variation, but if we're ambitious, then we have to deal with that. So last thing that I wanted to mention, I have a few slides, but I'm not going to bore you with those. It's suffice it to say that communication of quality is important, and quality communication, or quality of communication is important as well. These are interlinked. And we have to be very careful in communicating because, again, we had this exercise called peer review. Recently, I had a lot of meetings with my staff, and it turns out to me that we're, working in the same office, but, if not the peer review, it would be living together, understanding the same concept a little bit differently. It's very good that we have those exercises. That was kind of like eye-opening. And I think that, part of the problem is that we're not communicating even internally properly the issues of quality, or on the other side of the story, the quality of the communication is not good enough. And so I don't want to bore you with that. We had a presentation like 2 years ago or 3 years ago on this topic with my colleague from the office. He's mentioned here, Professor Okrasa as well. So I don't want to spend time on that. Of course, it reflects the principles of total quality management, but those are already expressed in a lot of the documents that we deal with every day in our system. And the last thing that I wanted to mention, I see Peter is sitting in front of me. I remember this paper, but of course it was just a short summary of this huge endeavor of Statistics Netherlands. Amazing to get a certification in quality, which I think we should all do. Getting the formal certificates of quality, it's always very useful for our communication, for example, that we have some tangible argument at our hands, and we can argue that what we do is actually not that bad. So to conclude, I'd like to repeat the thesis that I've stated at the beginning, that there is certainly, if not a need for an integrated, comprehensive framework for quality management in official statistics, then at least there is a need for a lot of work in this regard. And with this, I would like to thank you very much again. I'd like to thank the organizers and all of you for being here present. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dominic Rosprut.